everyone. Welcome to Beyond Immigration Law. It's a podcast that dives deep into the heart of the immigrant experience. We're going to be exploring the challenges and triumphs that go beyond the legal battles. Each episode brings to light the real stories that shape our immigrant communities, from cultural assimilation to the pursuit of the American dream. Join us as we discuss not just the laws that affect immigrants, but also the personal journeys and community issues that don't make the headlines. Hear firsthand accounts from immigrants, reactions from the community, and insight from experts who help us understand the broader social, economic, and emotional landscapes. Beyond Immigration Law isn't just about where we come from, but where we journey forward together. This podcast is available in video form on YouTube, Spotify, as well in audio-only form on all other popular podcast platforms. So be sure to follow WR Immigration on LinkedIn or subscribe to our newsletter for more information on when episodes will be released. This is our first episode of Beyond Immigration podcast. I'm Charina Garcia. I'm the Strategy and Innovation Partner at WR Immigration. I manage our firm's Northern California offices. I have over 25 years of experience representing and advising Fortune 500 companies, startups, and individuals on employment and family-based immigration. My role here at WR allows me to merge law with our cutting-edge technology, creating efficient processes and ensuring centralized access to crucial information. I am a second-generation Filipino-American with roots in the Philippines, and my family's journey to the U.S. really influenced my decision to go into immigration law. I was inspired by the opportunities I saw growing up and decided to dedicate my career to serving immigrants. I started at a boutique law firm, eventually managed my own practice, grew it to over 30 employees, and then merged with WR Immigration. My commitment exceeds professional service. I'm actively involved in pro bono projects, leading efforts to file humanitarian parole applications and parole applications for those in detention. I'm sharing my insights on the immigration experience and also published author in the Pinay Powerhouse anthology. And I have some great Pinay Powerhouse women here with me today. I love to explore the challenges and triumphs of Filipinas in the legal profession, invite you to connect and explore how we can navigate the complexities of immigration law together, leverage technology, and innovate and make a meaningful impact. So with that, I want to welcome everyone to, again, our very first podcast, Beyond Immigration Law. And this is about the women shaping today's legal industry. So I'll let these wonderful women introduce themselves. So we'll start with Ruthe.
Thank you, Charina. Such a pleasure and delight to be with you and two other wonderful Pinay Powerhouses and to bring my generation perspective into this discussion that you're having. My name is Ruthe Catolico Ashley, and I have the Ashley last name because when we got married almost 54 years ago, we always took our husband's last names. We didn't think about keeping our last names at all. I am the daughter of immigrants from the Philippines. I just saw a movie musical called Larry the Musical, which was the story of my father when it talked about the Manongs coming in 1930s and the Filipino farm workers. It was one of the most moving depictions that I saw of the life of the early Filipinos who came to California through Stockton and Delano. So my parents were born in the Philippines, were raised in the Philippines, moved to Hawaii in 1946, right after the World War II, when they had escaped the enemy soldiers by running and hiding in the jungle from the Bataan Death March. I was born in Hawaii, so I'm an American-born citizen. It was before it was a state. It was the territory at that time. And then we moved to California, where we first were in Stockton, where my uncle was already there and had called my father and his brother, my father, and said, come to Stockton. They have work here for all of you. And my parents came for the American dream. I think I'm the depiction of the early American dream because when my parents came with a 3rd grade and an 8th grade education, never did they think in one generation, their own daughter, which they came to America so that we could get, my mother would say, Ruthe, get a good education. They cannot take that away from you. And so she drummed that into our heads. And in one generation, her daughter became first a nurse. And after 15 years as a nurse, because all Filipinos become nurses, right? One time in their life. After 15 years as a nurse, I became a lawyer and graduated at the age of 41 from law school. And now I've been a lawyer for about 35 years. So that is my short story. I was a litigator for 15 years as a new lawyer. And then I was called back to my old law school to be the dean of career services at McGeorge School of Law. And then from there, I realized I was a woman and a woman of color, and I really needed to do and be the person that could open doors. I left there to become the first chief diversity officer for external affairs for CalPERS. And from CalPERS, we opened two nonprofits, California All and then California Law, to focus on the pipeline and focus on diversity in the profession. I am now retired, and I have hundreds, if not thousands, of what I call Ruthie's kids, lawyers, law students, people I've met in the last 35 years who, when I first became a Filipino lawyer, I was maybe a handful of 3 or 4 starting in the 1980s as lawyers. So that's my short story, and I'll turn it over back to Charina so she can go on to the next person. Thank you for this honor, Charina.
Oh, thank you, Ruthie. We're so happy to have you. So I'll pass it off to Maria. Maria, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, that's hard to follow. Ruthie, such a superstar. And every time I hear Ruthie speak, I learn something new about her that makes me just, wow. And I hope I'm one of the kids, maybe the black sheep kid.
You're part of the family.
Anyway,
in this family, Maria.
there's just good trouble rebels type of people.
We're all black sheeps. It's the white sheep.
Rule breaker.
We're brown sheep.
We're disruptors. We're all the black sheep.
Okay, well, I'll go. My name is Maria Carmen Hinayan. Pronouns are she and her. I'm an attorney. I'm based here in Northern California in Sacramento County. My legal experience is about 10 years. My legal experience spans, but it's mostly labor, employment, and education law. I also do, right now, currently, I'm doing workplace and education investigator, so attorney investigations, neutral. But I've done civil rights. My focus in my law, and the reason I went to law is because of my extensive experience in LGBTQ advocacy, particularly in the transgender advocacy. As a trans woman myself, I've experienced, along with my community, a lot of hardships and discrimination and violence, right, connected to our gender and gender identity. And so that's one of the many reasons I wanted to become a lawyer, and I pursued a career in law. I'm also a first generation immigrant. I grew up in the Philippines. I was raised by a fabulous, brilliant single mother, right? She's a tiny woman, 4'4", but she's a powerhouse herself. She's a chemical engineer, worked herself to college, and then single-handedly raised 2 beautiful women. And my sister is actually a nurse, Ruthie. So there you go. And she makes more money than me, I think. As all nurses do. But when I was an adult, my father, who I never met in my life, who was in the United States, wanted me to come here, and so I came. However, that wasn't a very positive experience. Of course, he was expecting a son and a daughter, fabulous one, was getting off a plane, and he was like, whoa, what's going on? Anyways, that caused me to go on my own way, and it was a bit of a struggle when I was starting out in the United States. Of course, the culture shock was there, but also without no support and I don't know anyone, right? I struggled with homelessness and survival and deal with all that. But here I am now, right? I went with the support of community and support of people I met along the way, genuinely kind and supportive people. I was able to um, land on my feet, get back and get a college degree and become and go to law school, and then now as a lawyer practicing law. So that's my story. Well, my story is there's more to the story, but I guess that's the gist of the story, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you, Charina, for inviting me.
No, sure. I love, you're a believer in the shine theory of success.
Ah,
I don't shine if you don't shine.
oh
Love that.
yes,
Well,
there's
love
there's two women, Anna Friedman and Aminata So, where they crafted this theory called shine theory of success. It's kind of like a new way of looking at success and professionalism, right? Because the traditional way we see professionalism and also success is competitiveness and
yeah.
cutthroat, where people are um, you have to pull someone in order to lift yourself up.
Yeah.
For them, for women, which is harmful to women and other minorities, for them, they started thinking that maybe we should look more into something more collaborative. Like we could succeed by making our friends and the people around us succeed as well. Because when we lift others, it will also lift us up. And so, the whole shine theory means like if I make you shine, I will shine too. So we
I love
shine.
it.
Yeah, you
I
don't
love
have.
it. That's what we're about. That's what we're talking about. Thanks, Maria. So, Kaelyne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Charina. It is such an honor to be among three of my mentors. I am still so moved by the fact that I got to interview Ruthe and Charina for two Pinay Powerhouse webinars last year. And then I was so moved by Maria's panel at our last Pinay Powerhouse. So it's just, it's such great energy to be among the three of you today. And I'm very grateful that you invited me into this space so that I could learn from all of you. But just a little bit about me. My name is Kaelyne Yumul Wietelman, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a proud Pinay Powerhouse and FALA DC president. And I am based here in DC, of course. And I am an associate at Venable, where I practice advertising law and general consumer protection. I'm also passionate about serving our Pinay legal community. So I am very involved in the Pinay Powerhouse, and I serve as a board member. And I've served in previous roles with the National Filipino-American Lawyers Association. And I just try to be of help whenever I know that there's any Filipino organizations that need it, whether it's in the West Coast or the East Coast. I'll fly anywhere. But a little bit more about my story. I, like Ruthe, am a second generation proud Filipino immigrant and daughter of Filipino immigrants. My parents grew up in Angeles City in the Philippines, and they immigrated to the United States when they were 18 years old. And my dad always tells me that he came to the country with $75 in his pocket, and that's it. That always meant so much to me that my parents worked so incredibly hard because they knew they wanted to provide a better life for me. So they were married in California, and then they had me. So I'm a California baby, but I was raised in Texas because there were more job opportunities for both of my parents there. And I grew up in Texas, went to college in Oklahoma, then law school in Indiana, and then now I've placed roots here in DC. So I like to tell everyone I'm preparing to run for president one day so that I get all the states under my belt.
There you go.
but, but in reality, it's just because I want to see as much of the United States as possible and meet as many people. And I've really been so blessed to have those experiences.
Great. Well, why don't you tell us about your legal journey?
Sure. So I never really considered going into nursing because the thought of science and saving lives was very stressful for me. I did not feel joy when I watched Grey's Anatomy growing up. And I just felt like seeing what my mom did. My mom was an ER nurse and is still a nurse. And I was just in awe of her. And actually, my first memory ever is I was very little and my mom brought me to the ER because she couldn't find a babysitter for some reason that day. And I snuck into the ER instead of like staying in the waiting room. And I saw my mom, this tiny Pinay Powerhouse woman, pin down this huge drunk man, tie his wrists to the hospital bed all by herself. And I just stood there saying, "Mom?" And she said, "How did you get back here?" And so I think having that imprinted on my memory, I'm like, I don't know if I am gutsy or science-based enough to be a nurse. So unfortunately, I never went down that path. But my grandfather was an attorney in the Philippines, and I never had the privilege of meeting him. But his legacy really left a mark on my family. And my dad always said, "Oh, I think you'd make a good lawyer because you like to argue a lot, like here, you know." And so I kept that in the back of my mind. But it wasn't until I was writing my English honors thesis in college when I decided that law school was something worth pursuing. I was writing an honors thesis called Dog Eaters, and I was exploring how Filipino-American food was portrayed in literature based on Jessica Hagedorn's book, Dog Eaters. And I knew what Filipino food was, and I wrote about adobo and balut and all of my favorite foods, but I didn't know how to describe American food. So I Googled it one day, and up popped this photo essay where this photographer recreated all of the last meals of death row inmates. And I was so moved by these images, particularly because one of the pictures featured a bowl of just mint chocolate chip ice cream. Wow. And I sat there in disbelief because that's my favorite flavor of ice cream. And I was like, there's something in common with me and this unseen person, because all you saw was the food. You had no idea the story behind that person or anything. And so I said, I want to pursue becoming a criminal defense attorney, and I want to help post-conviction relief. And so that motivated me to go to law school. And then I took crim law. And then after learning about the model penal code, I was like, maybe this isn't my path here. But I still wanted to help people in a way that led to more of my strengths. And I, through a series of fortunate events, went from antitrust to consumer protection. And now I feel very passionate that the work that I do, even though it's on the firm side, I still feel that it's helping consumers in a very helpful and tangible way.
Maria, how about you? Do you want to share your journey to be in the legal field?
Well, just like Kaelyne, early on in my childhood, there were signs. So I grew up in the Philippines, right? Very in a small town, very traditional. We're not supposed to talk to our, talk back to our elders or argue, right? When you're being scolded as a child. And oftentimes you get slapped in the mouth, right? Sometimes by chinelas, slipper.
Oh dear.
I got slapped in the mouth a lot because I like to argue. Because sometimes I feel like I'm on the right, or someone, like one of my cousins were on the right. So I got in trouble a lot for speaking and arguing. And so, one of my aunties told me maybe she'll become a lawyer someday. But I never really thought about that, right? Most of my life were about, we moved a lot because, I was raised by a single mom, and then she went abroad to support us. So a lot of my life is about figuring things out for myself, but also figuring myself out, right? Because of my gender identity, which is very much manifest early on in my childhood. So I didn't really think about what my future would like. Although I've always been an honor student, right? Valedictorian, elementary, high school, everything. I didn't think about what I would be because most of the time I don't feel like I belong to myself or like I'm not living my authentic self. Right? I feel like I don't belong in my body, even though, I was existing and living and, obviously thriving in academics and stuff. When I went to the United States, well, let's walk back. When I was at the University of the Philippines, that's when I transitioned, right? That's when I started my physical transition, when I started living fully as a woman. And that was the first time in my life where I felt very free and just myself, and that I could conquer the world. And that's when I started becoming more involved in activism, like student politics. I was the first openly transgender student leader that got elected at the University Student Council in the University of the Philippines, which back at home, it's a very big deal,
That's
right?
a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's a big deal here.
Yes.
Yeah, and University of the Philippines Student Council officers, they become senators. So it's really big deal. And then after that, I was elected as the national chairperson of the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines. So this is the whole country. And I was openly trans campaigning, right? Like in the southern regions among Muslim students, we have a lot of Catholic universities. But I won. So I didn't expect to win again, because again, Philippines is pretty conservative when it comes to these things. This is way, way back. So I don't want to age myself, but this
Don't
is
hate yourself.
before the age of social media, where people are becoming more enlightened and open about gender identity and sexual orientation. So that's when the seeds are being planted that maybe I'm meant to do something more towards like the realm of law or social justice. When I came to the US, I started working more in public health, in like the HIV prevention and activism work. So that's where I started. And I really get to work with a lot of clients in underprivileged and underserved communities, mostly LGBTQ, mostly trans, and mostly people of color and immigrants. And so I myself was experiencing discrimination and injustice in my everyday life, but also I get to be exposed really to a lot of helping these people and learning about their experiences. Which made me think maybe I should go to law. But the catalyst for me was around 2007, 2006. I was in a very violent relationship. This is a relationship that I had. I was in the Los Angeles area. I was living with someone who was very violent. I myself was also just trying to survive back then. And trying to figure out how I'm going to leave this person. And so I finally got out of that relationship, and we ended up in court because I have to file a restraining order. There was a hearing, but I was so traumatized. I was just emotionally a mess, and I didn't know any better. Basically, I just went to court. My ex partner, he's rich, he's privileged. He has a powerhouse attorney, a male attorney, they're white, and they come in there and they come on all prepared in the court, and apparently they have filed certain paperworks.
Yeah.
And I'm a mess. I don't know anything about the law. I don't know anything about what I needed to file.
Yeah.
And in front of the judge, I just cried because my case was going to be dismissed because I didn't file the right things on time.
Yeah.
And I burst into tears and cried in front of the judge. And the judge gave a continuance, like delayed the
Oh my
hearing.
God.
And because obviously I was not informed, I was pro se, but also I didn't know anything. And at the time I was in the court, my ex was like within arm's reach of me, and this person almost killed me. And so I was crying, And then at the walking outside the courthouse, there were pamphlets and brochures of domestic violence, support and legal support and stuff. And so I went to the LGBT center in Los Angeles because they have a support for victims of violence. And I got a lawyer and they prepared me. I'm still a mess, but they filed the right paperwork. They filed the right documents, prepared all the evidence. And then when we come back to court, I was just standing there. Of course, my ex was still standing, arms reach around me, but I wasn't crying too much. I was prepared by them because they also provide, mental health support.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't even have to say anything. And there was barely any argument because the papers were filed, the right evidence, and then he just went there. And then, of course, the judge ruled in my favor. And that was for me, that was like the realization, like, oh my gosh, the power that lawyers have, the power that the legal knowledge have. I feel so powerless at the before that, but at that moment, I feel so powerful. And that really, walking out of that courtroom with a restraining order, of course, that didn't prevent him from violating the restraining order, but I get to call the police and he gets arrested. So having that piece of paper with me, I was walking out of the courtroom and I just told myself, I'm going to become a lawyer.
Oh, that's amazing.
I said, I feel so powerless, but having that lawyer beside me doing the right thing, saying the right words, it's almost like, Harry Potter with the right spells. And things happen and people are protected.
Yes.
People are, wrongs are right. People who are wrong get their justice. And so to me, having that realization, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to reclaim my power in this world by going to law school. I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be that person who will stand with someone powerless and make them feel powerful, give them back their life. And so that's so 2008, I went back to college and then I got a degree and then I graduated from Cal State Long Beach, and I was fierce, right? I was honored, straight A's. And then I went to UCLA Law School and that's the story.
That's incredible. I know that's going to inspire a lot of people just listening to that story. So thanks for sharing your story and your journey. Ruthe, why don't you share your journey? Because yours is a little different from a lot of our journeys.
Maria, that's amazing. That's just amazing. I'm so glad to hear your story because I'm with Charina. That's going to inspire a lot of people. And earlier, I told you that I was a nurse for 15 years because that's what Filipino women did in that generation. That's what all women did. We became nurses, teachers, or secretaries. There wasn't a lot available. We weren't told we could be this and this and this and this. I was a generation of Donna Reed, where she would show up on American TV wearing heels and all dressed up in the kitchen. And Lucille Ball was always in the kitchen. And my mother, who was the first fierce Filipino woman I'd ever known, and you know that Filipino families, many times they're matriarchal, she made all the decisions. Coming from the Philippines, she was a fierce power woman. She told my dad what he would do, gave him his money, paid all the bills. She could have run, if she had had a college education, she could have run any Fortune 500 company. But she and that was my role model. It wasn't the role model that I saw on TV and that I saw in America when we moved to America. The role model was women became secretaries, nurses, or teachers. And I was going to become a teacher. And then I ended up in nursing. And I ended up in nursing because it was during the Vietnam War and I'd been married to my high school sweetheart. And we got married he got drafted in 1968 and we didn't know where he was going to go, but we thought he might be going to Vietnam. And he ended up being sent to Vietnam, and we got married between the time that he did his advanced individual training as a medic and him being shipped to Vietnam. So 13 weeks between when he was done with his advanced individual training and before he was shipped to Vietnam, we got married. We had a 3-week honeymoon, and then he left for Vietnam. He was in Vietnam for 5 weeks, and he was killed. And so here I found myself in 1968 as a young Vietnam War widow, one of the very first that anybody knew in California and in Glendale, where we lived, of anyone who had actually been killed in the Vietnam War. That taught me many, many things about death and dying and loss. And it became something very real and personal to me and to many other people. And when I went back to college, I had finished 2.5 years of college, and I stopped to get married, and I was going to go back while he was wherever he was going to be. But when I went back to college, I changed from a business major to a nursing major because so many of the people that I knew were in nursing. And by the way, I did not have any Filipino girlfriends. I never dated anyone who was Filipino. I was the sole Filipino with my sister in our high school. We were it.
Yeah.
And when we moved into Glendale, we were the first Filipino family to buy a house in Glendale. And my mother, I remember, she went around to all the neighbors and she would bring lumpia and pancit to all of them and introduce herself by saying, "Hi, my name is Victoria, and I'm going to be your new neighbor. And I brought you some pancit and some lumpia so you could know some of the food we eat." And so here she is going around meeting all these neighbors with our Filipino food, and my sister and I being the only Filipino family. Well, jumping forward, I went through nursing, became a nurse, was a nurse for 15 years. And I was in midlife crisis. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced midlife crisis, but that happens between 35 and 45 when you kind of look at your life and you decide, what am I doing? Where am I going? I can't stand my life. That's where I was. And I just happened to run away after 15 years of nursing. And I was a nursing professor at that time for Cal State LA, by the way. I was teaching nursing at the program at Cal State LA. And I ran away for a weekend with my girlfriends, and because we couldn't stand our lives at that time, we were all in our mid-30s. And I turned on the TV, and The Cosby Show came on. And I've never seen The Cosby Show, but my kids had said, Mom, you got to watch The Cosby Show. You'll love Claire Huxtable. You'll really identify with Claire Huxtable. They had been watching The Cosby Show. I turned on The Cosby Show. I saw The Cosby Show, and I said to my 3 girlfriends, we got to watch The Cosby Show. My kids tell me The Cosby Show is fabulous. And there was a 5-minute segment of that show that changed my life forever. If any of you have seen The Cosby Show, it was Claire Huxtable in the bedroom. I can see it as clearly today as I saw it then. In 1985, she's talking to her husband, Dr. Huxtable, about a case she had in court. And in my fevered, overblown, not reality-looking midlife crisis brain, I saw this woman of color who happened to be a lawyer, who looked like she came off the front page of Vogue magazine, whose house looked like it came out of the middle of Home Beautiful, who sounded like she had a double PhD in child psychology. She was a perfect wife, a perfect mother. She never cooked. There was part of that segment where she goes into the kitchen, lifts up the lid of spaghetti that he has been cooking, spaghetti sauce. She never cooked. And she's talking about this case she had in court. And I thought, look at her. If she can be a lawyer, I can do that too. That was in March of 1985. By August of 1985, I had enrolled in McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento because we were moving from Glendale to follow my husband's career.
Yeah.
He was the vice president for human resources for Adventist Health. We were moving to Sacramento. Only 3 law schools in Sacramento. One was no longer accepting students. One was unaccredited. And the only one still accepting students was McGeorge School of Law. Within a week of the time that I'd seen Claire Huxtable, I was up at McGeorge interviewing. We had looked at 35 houses. We had put a house in escrow. We'd found a house to move into, and I was accepted to law school. I started law school in March 1985. It was the toughest year of my life, becoming a nursing professor to a first-year law student. And here I am, all these years later, having had a most wonderful and fabulous career. That's my story.
Your journey is amazing. Just that story about the Cosby Show, because I remember watching that too when I was a kid also.
And seeing a woman of color who's a lawyer. If you
Yeah,
can see it, you can be it. And that's what we tell our kids right now in our pipeline in high school. If you can see it, you can be it. That's why we put people that look like you right in front of them and they go, wow, we can
And
be
that's what
it.
we're doing, right? That's what the four of us are doing right now.
Yes.
And I think that's why this is really an important podcast. Like, I'm tearing up. Like, you guys, like, hopefully they don't show this part of me tearing up, but I tear up as I listen to all of your stories. And, you know, the four of us were together at the most recent Pinay Powerhouse. And just to tell you how these amazing Pinay women come together. So back in 2016, I think these are all Ruthe's kids. Christine Start, Mari Bandoma Colado, Lorna Garcia de Guzman, Vanessa Candelaria, and Jennifer Santa Ana. They came together and they were looking for a women's conference that focused on empowering Filipino women and women who are aspiring to become leaders in the law. And the four of us attended the 7th Pinay Powerhouse, which was held in San Diego last month. And the theme of the conference was Sand in San Paquita and honoring the promises we make to our community and our profession, as well as the promises we make to and keep for ourselves. And it focused on 3 things: the promises of success, the promises of pride and representation, and the promises of authenticity and real allyship. And so, you know, with these 3 wonderful women in front of me and me wanting to make sure that we encourage others to join this special magical event that happens once a year. So I've asked Maria, this was your second Pinay Powerhouse? Third? First in person.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us your thoughts about it.
I have like a push and pull relationship with the Filipino community. As I don't know if you know, but at least in my experience as a trans Pinay, transphobia and homophobia runs deep in our culture. This is hundreds of years of colonization by various colonizing, empires have conditioned a lot of Filipino people, generations of Filipino people, about certain rigid mentality regarding gender, sexuality, gender identity, sexual orientation. And so I'm always kind of, I would say, on guard every time I would go on Filipino spaces, whether regular Filipino spaces, like, we have all these regional fiestas, Filipino-Americans, like we would have one in the Bay Area. I would go, but I would keep myself a little bit like on the side, or like I would be very quiet and reserved. And I would just maybe show up and then leave, not really participate or, open up. So these are some of the reasons why although I would not say involved, but I would like be a member of Filipino lawyer groups or Filipino-American lawyer groups. I'm more like an observer looking from the outside. And this was the first time that I really went and I took a risk. And I feel more comfortable because this is a women's space. So being a woman's space, I know that there will be some common ground in terms of like empathy and kindness and understanding in terms of like lived experiences, shared common experiences as women in the legal field. And I'm not expecting, people to be very much educated and progressive with regards to their views about trans people and trans people in the women's space. But at least as women and some of our shared experience, I feel like I could find a common ground and a good entry point. And I was not disappointed at all. It was a very affirming space. I wasn't sure what it would be. I thought it would be one of those professional conferences where we're going to be talking about the law.
So far from that.
How are we going to fix like the legal profession? We have experts, another. And I'm a nerd. I'm a self-professed nerd, so I enjoy those. But like, I was expecting that more of like on the surface kinds of conversations. Um, but I was really surprised in a good way because it's just a space for affirmation. It felt for me almost like a day long therapy and empowerment group, right? Like I just felt at home with it. I felt that I left and then I have returned, even though I don't know any of you. For me, psychologically and spiritually, I felt like I was reunited with people that I knew. Maybe in my past life, we were all sisters, or I talked about the Babaylan, the Filipina priestesses, who are all women and cis and trans women. Maybe we were that in our past life. We were those powerful women before colonization who are running Filipino society. But for me, on an emotional and spiritual level, I felt like I have returned. And I
That's
felt
amazing.
that I was affirmed. I felt that I was at home. And I felt that, and I know I was a panelist, but it's more of me like telling my story and then being heard and being seen. And it's important to me. I know people approach me as well and say like they're so thankful for what I said. They felt like they learned so much. They felt very touched. But I don't have, and this is probably the first time I'm saying, and I hope everyone who was there would hear this. But like, it's actually more beneficial for me. I felt like I was really seen and heard, and it made me feel so empowered. And to be honest, I was going through something before the Pinay Powerhouse on my personal and professional life. I'm still going through about that, but going there, I was so down. But leaving that place, I was just I feel very powerful. I feel very hopeful. I feel like I'm shining. I feel like I'm shining. I feel like the sun, although we just had that eclipse. Um, but and I know everything's gonna be all right in my life, in my career, everything that whatever is happening, I'm here, and I know that I'm not alone. And I'm looking forward to more Pinay Powerhouse, but I'm also very happy that I get to meet people. I met Serena. I know about Ruthe, and I met Ruthe in some events before, but I never really had a personal connection with her, and I feel very blessed that I know her now, personal level. And Kaelyne, oh my gosh, DC, let's go. I'm looking forward. I feel that this is so important for people like us, especially people like me who feel that I don't belong anywhere. Um, and feel that I have to always just be on the side, observing and watching and not really being part of. And so I am thankful for Pinay Powerhouse for inviting me in, as a panelist, but I ended up attending the whole thing because it's so powerful, and so it's really just what I needed at that moment. And so I'm really thankful.
Yeah, I think we all kind of come away with different experiences, and that was my fifth one. And every time I go, I meet all these incredible women, but I take away so much more. I think it's important that we continue to give back, right? And that's why I wanted to have this podcast and kind of share, what we experience, because I want others to experience the same sort of inclusivity and just being heard that we all felt. And Ruthe, these were your kids, Ruthie's kids, I think, these powerful women who started this Pinay Powerhouse conference. But, what are your thoughts after the last Pinay Powerhouse?
I'm one of those that started off when there were very, very few of us. And so we weren't Filipino lawyers, we were Asian American lawyers. In Sacramento, we didn't have a SACFALA. There was no NFALA. There was no Fala. There was no Paba. There was Paba. Maybe Paba started as the first Filipino group. But we were all just Asian American lawyers. And I remember meeting Tani Cantil Sakaue as a law student. She had just graduated from law school. She couldn't find a job as a woman of color. And they finally hired her at the Sacramento DA's office when we saw each other in the elevator and thought, oh, look at us. We're here together in the same space. We need to know each other. So when I go to the Pinay Powerhouses and I hear stories like Maria, and I see Kaelyne again, and I see Charina, and I've seen you all as younger lawyers. I've seen Mari when she was in her last year of law school. She asked me to come and talk to the Filipino-American Law Students Association at Hastings. So I've known her as a law school student, and I've seen the Filipino lawyers grow. I was there in 2012. When 15 of us met in Washington, D.C. with Ruthe Figueroa to think about forming Infala. I was part of so many conversations when Ruthe was trying to figure out, how do we do this? Do we become a part of NAPABA? Do we become our own entity? Do we meet with NAPABA? And historically, this last Pinay Powerhouse, going from knowing one or two or three of us to seeing a room full of you, it just is so moving to me. And it just says to me, Ruthe, your job continues to keep on not just opening the doors, but sticking your foot in the door. All the times that I've sat as the only woman of color, and some of you still do that, the only woman and the only person of color. And I know, Maria, you are just making trailblazing moves everywhere as the first transgender in many rooms. And even though we've learned and we've opened and we've been progressive, there's so much further to go. But I just want to remind you all where we were when I first began and where you all are now, and how you have now become the instruments of change. Now the hope for the future is in all of you. And as some of us really come to the ends of our careers, when our shelf life, and I tell people, my shelf life is limited. In 10 to 15 years, they're going to say, Ruthe who? And it's going to be Charina. Oh, I know Charina. She did this and this. Oh, and I know Kaelyne. You remember the conference in D.C. when it made so much change and we did this? And then they're going to say about Maria, do you remember that panel that Maria was on? Now what you have and what opportunity. And on top of that responsibility, I could look around that room and think, we're in good hands. We're in really good hands. And I can go to the beach and drink Mai Tais. I can lead. I can be the person who has been the mother superior, or the person who really opens so many doors, because you continue to do that. You are now the generation of today, and you are now building the future. I'm just so proud of all of you. It just makes my heart full.
I swear, every time I hear Ruthe speaks, just make me want to run for office.
Keep talking, Ruthe.
I feel so empowered. I'm going to run for Congress now.
Yes, okay. We need you. Maisie needs somebody to follow her as the senator.
Yeah. And maybe someone listening to this podcast is going to be our next senator, right?
Exactly.
And I think, Ruthe, when you shared the story of your Claire Huxtable, you're our Claire Huxtable.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
And you do have a nice house there, just like Claire Huxtable. Like in the
here. Yeah.
Oh my God. Look at my house.
Look at your beautiful house.
Yes, and you're also beautiful.
Clear. Oh my gosh. It's giving Claire Huxtable.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's giving Ruthe Ashley.
Yeah. Elevated version.
Now, see, now we're all crying, and you guys
we're all crying.
You're all building the future. You are now, and you are building the future.
And we're going to continue to build it and pass it on. So, Kaelyne, tell us about your experience and what your plans are for the next Pinay Powerhouse in DC.
Sure. So I was roped into Pinay Powerhouse. I think it was 3, whichever one was the virtual one. In the middle of the pandemic, we were all shut down. And I was already involved in Follow DC, and they said, we need someone to represent like the East Coast Filipinos. And I was a little nervous because as I said at the top of our discussion, I grew up in Texas and lived in Oklahoma and Indiana, and I'm not used to being in Filipino communities. I didn't grow up speaking Tagalog, and I oftentimes had to be the only Pinay, the only Asian American, the only person of color in the room. And so I'm like, oh gosh, am I like Filipino enough to do this? I don't know. I guess I know how to eat with my hands, but I don't know. But that question was answered within seconds because just the warm embrace of the Pinay Powerhouse community, even though we were online, it was so powerful and it like radiated like the time-space continuum. We learned so much and we built connections that have now lasted years, like 4 years later. I know I can still call a Pinay Powerhouse person on the phone today and say, like, I need you to get on a plane and come here. Like, they're very strong sisterhood bonds. And it was so powerful that in 2020, there was a panel and they were talking about ancestral lessons. Like, what are we bringing back from our ancestors? And someone had taught us what the word Kaelyne meant about freedom and democracy and how this is so critical to our culture. And there was something that was so powerful in that moment to me that I jumped up from my office desk, ran to my living room, saw my husband. I said, one day we're going to have a daughter and her name is going to be Kala. And he said, okay, like he knew that her name was going to be Kala. And sure enough, I am a very proud mom of a 1.5-year-old girl named Kala. And I'm so excited that there is a future for Pinay Powerhouse and that the beauty is going to continue on. And so I part of the promise that I wanted to make this time at Pinay Powerhouse 7 was I promised to embody the Pinay Powerhouse values and to teach them on to the next generation so that she is feisty, spunky, and knows how to advocate for herself and for the community so that one day I can also sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais because I think that is our responsibility, exactly like how Ruthe said. So, in Pinay Powerhouse 7, we talked about the sun, sand, and Sampaguita and what are the promises that we are making. Well, I'm going to hold everyone to the promises that they made because in Pinay Powerhouse 8, our theme is going to be advocate with an 8 and ingat. So take care of yourself, hold yourself accountable to the promises that you're making. Let's re-examine those. Let's carry them forward. And so in March of 2025, I'm hoping to have 200 Pinay Powerhouses in Washington, D.C., and we're going to make the magic happen all over again with panels. And we're going to, according to Maria's vision, we are going to all get sworn in at the Supreme Court.
Yes.
But most importantly, I think, this election season is going to be tumultuous. I think it's going to be very draining and it's going to take a lot out of us. So the biggest part of what we're doing is we're going to teach you how to advocate for yourself through disaggregated data, through immigration justice, and through reproductive justice. And we are going to teach you how to take care of yourself in that process. How do you keep your cup full so that you can pour into another cup? How do you keep the work sustainable and so that the community continues to thrive and not just try to hold its breath underwater every now and then? So I invite everyone to come to DC March of 2025. You don't have to be Pinay to come. We welcome allies. There's so much space for you and for all of us, especially at the table. Our Kamayan table, we never have limited seats, so everyone is always welcome. And I'm very excited. So please mark your calendars.
Well, we're going to mark our calendars. You're going to give us information how we can keep informed. And you bring up a really important topic, which I always love to talk about, which is self-care, right? And so for you, Kaelyne, what do you do to navigate stresses of work or life or just, being a woman, honestly?
I think there are different ways you can approach it. There are small things you should do every day, and then there are also bigger things. So like every day I take care of my schedule. So I try to stay as organized as possible, and I prioritize the heavy workload that I have. And I tell myself, okay, I need to make sure I'm eating and drinking water and sleeping. And so how do you just stay organized? Like that is like the basis of it. On a larger scale, it's being passionate about the spaces that you're in. I love the work that I do. I love talking to marketers and helping people get safe products in their hands and helping businesses comply with the law. And I find that really exciting. And then I also love being part of the Filipino legal community. It energizes me. It fills my cup. So even on weeks where, they're long, long weeks, having the spaces that energize me, it keeps me going and keeps the momentum going. Making sure that you're never an island. How do you share yourself? It's okay to be vulnerable in the legal world, and when finding your people that you feel safe to build you up and to feed you when you need to be fed and to praise you when you get an award and to nominate you so that you can do bigger and better things and win those awards. So I guess my first is to stay organized, and the second is to find your people.
Great. Those are great tips. How about you, Maria? Can you share some of your things you do for self-care?
Well, therapy. I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for that. Do that. It's nice to have someone to talk to without shame and fear and, guilt. It's important to heal ourselves. And I only speaking to myself who have gone through a lot of experiences in my life, right? And I'm sure everyone has some kind of experience that has left a mark on them, but it's important to heal yourself so that you continue to move on and live your fullest life. I'm also an advocate of nature as the best healer. Where I live right now, I live in Sacramento County. I live by the mountains. There's rivers and lakes and woods. I like hiking with my dog and my loved ones. It's kind of like a thing that we do a lot. We try to do it once a week. And when we travel, we also do a lot of traveling. We always incorporate nature with it because I grew up in the Philippines in a small town at the foot of Mount Banahaw in Liliu, Laguna. And my playground as a child were rivers and waterfalls and our farm and, climbing trees and mountains. So, and that has helped me also cope as a child. So I know as an adult, that's what I've been doing. I'm also always in nature and it helps me. I also like food, Filipino food mostly,
Food,
but
yeah.
Yes.
I love to cook. So cooking is therapeutic for me, but I also love to eat. And I also like eating different cuisines of the world. I like experiencing cultures through food and music and art. So those are things that I like to do as well. Like I like to visit cities and find out the mom and pop shops where all the locals would go, but also different food from different countries. So, and then again, I like going to museums and I like watching shows, cultural dances. I love that from around the world. I love watching that on TV. I love watching it in person. And we should do in DC, we should do a Filipiniana. I used to, when I was in Philippines, I used to dance Filipino cultural dances and choreograph. So if all of you want to dance cariñosa or tinikling, I can choreograph. It's not that
Let's
hard.
do it.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
there's so many. We have Singkil, we have Subli, we have a lot. Subli probably easier for everyone, and it's
Let's
very
do it. I
Let's
say
do
let's
the
add
easiest
it. Let's add
one, Maria.
Yeah, let's do the easiest one. We could all do it together, be an
Here,
exercise.
okay, we can, and I volunteer myself to teach. Like Subli is probably the easiest one. Everyone just have to bring a hat
Okay.
and wear
Yeah.
a skirt because it's just
Let's
the
do
hat.
it.
It's a traditional dance in Batangas. It's connected to religion, but it's a very nice dance. So those are the things that helps me have a nice, holistic, healthy life outside of my work.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing. How about you, Ruthie? I know you're going to be on the Mai Tai, have a Mai Tai on the beach,
Yeah.
but what can you give some tips on,
Well,
for
let me
others?
just piggyback on everything that Kaelyne said and everything Maria said, because I think that's all wonderful. And what I'll add is authenticity, trying to be as much your authentic self in every relationship and in everything you do. It's so easy for us as women to think that we've got to be somebody else and to act like somebody else, to meet somebody else's expectations. But to really, one of the things that I've done in my life is change all my shoulds to coulds to put me in the power seat. And that's what I learned in therapy. When you're telling yourself that you should be this or you should do that or you should, I just changed everything that's a should to a could to put me in the power seat to give me a choice. And so that was the one thing I wanted to add to every wonderful thing that two of you said. And then I think the last thing is to find your passion. Like Kaelyne said, find something that you're passionate about. I'm retired right now, so I haven't gotten paid for anything that I've done since probably for the last 7 years. But I've had almost a full volunteer work life because my passion was building the pipeline and creating a legal profession that looked like the people that we served in California. And I still do that 30 hours a week. But in between, I travel. So what we have found and what I have found is a whole bunch of friends who like to travel with me.
Yeah.
So authenticity, finding your passion, and finding something that really fills your life. For instance, on Friday, we're leaving for Croatia.
Oh my
It's my first time I've been on an international flight in 4 months, and I've missed it because I've had surgery. But last year, I did 12, 13 trips, and this year, I'm on track to do almost as much, but really finding people that you love and that you want to travel with. So I travel with my husband. I travel with 2 or 3 different sets of girlfriends. Totally different trip when you travel with girlfriends. I've decided I've got to do what Charina just did: is find enough people to go to Korea and have a weekend where we can get our faces back into shape.
Skincare weekend. Skincare. I call
Skincare
it
weekend.
skincare
I
weekend.
need,
gosh,
I
no.
need for that. And so that's self-care. It takes everything that you said, Maria, and I've spent 2 years in therapy too, and I continue to do that on myself. But that way we really find the most authentic self and live our best lives.
That's lovely. So Ruthie, Kaelyne, and Maria, how can people find you? Like, how, if they want to be one of Ruthie's kids or connect with either or the three of you? Ruthie, you want to share?
Email me at any time. It's ruthe.ashleyesq@gmail.com. And I get emails from, or Facebook me, become my friend on Facebook. But I get emails still from the kids that I taught, and I still connect with the kids that I taught for 1 year at De Anza High School in 2012. They were juniors and sophomores then, and now some of them have graduated from law school and are lawyers, and I still connect with them. So connect with me if you want to. I'd love to talk to you. I don't care how old you are or what you're doing. If you think about becoming a lawyer, or if you haven't, I'll talk you into becoming one.
How about you, Kaelyne?
You're welcome to email me at kywietelman@venable.com or find me on LinkedIn. Or I also am a amateur photographer for the DMV area. So you can find me on Instagram at Wietel Photography if you need your pictures done.
That's so great. That's amazing. How about you, Maria?
Yeah, you can add me on LinkedIn. I'm active there, Facebook, Instagram. But you can also email me at maria@mchlaw.org. MCH is just my initial, Maria Carmen Hinayan. You can email me there.
I want to thank these amazing women for being on my very first podcast.
And
Beyond
thank you
Immigration Law. And if this is what it's going to be like, I'm going to look forward to all the next ones. And this has been an amazing, amazing time I've spent with the three of you. And I can't thank you enough for everything you do and for sharing what you do and for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I just want to see at the next Pinay Powerhouse 8, right? All of us coming together. And instead of the 200, Kaelyne, that you said, let's make it 400. Like, let's get more women, really embracing this power that we cultivate. And like Maria says, make each other shine so we can shine, right? So be sure to follow us, WR Immigration, on LinkedIn. Stay tuned for my next podcast. And thank you again, Maria, Kaelyne, Ruthe, for being on my very first podcast.
Thank you. And I love you all.
Thank you.
Are we leaving or are we staying?
No, you can stay. They'll cut it now.